Vestry Orientation. My name is Brendan Hunter, Program Director here at the Episcopal Church Foundation. So glad that you're joining us this evening for this webinar. Oops, is the audio still there? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, great. Sorry, that was just a little weird feedback there. Gotta love technology. Just want to give a quick introduction to the Episcopal Church Foundation for those of you who may not be familiar with us. We are an independent lay-led organization that was founded in 1949. Our mission is to support the leadership, strategic, and financial capabilities of congregations, dioceses, and other Episcopal organizations. We do this through a variety of programs. You can see our desired impacts for the Episcopal Church here on the slide. But those programs include everything from capital campaigns, plan giving, endowment management services, our strategic solutions, vital teams for strong lay clergy partnerships, ECF vital practices. If you don't already, I will be talking about Vestry papers and encourage you to subscribe to that, as well as ECF publications, which is an area that I'd like to especially highlight for you this evening. And particularly for those of you who are on the Vestry, I'd encourage you to check out the Vestry Resource Guide, which has a great amount of resources for your Vestry service and covers everything from stewardship to vision and planning to clergy transitions. And that's available along with all these other publications that you see on your screen through our distributor, Forward Movement, or it's also on Amazon, or you can check out your favorite Episcopal bookseller. And I should note that it's also available in Spanish and as well as print and ebook versions too. And again, thanks for everyone joining. Just a quick introduction. I am the Program Director for Leadership Resources here at the Episcopal Church Foundation. My primary areas involve ECF vital practices in our publications, as well as working with Miguel on our Fellowship Partners program, as well as overseeing all of the ECF's in-person events, as well as our online webinars, which you are a part of this evening, which we do throughout the year. I have a background in parish administration. I have served for many years in the Diocese of Chicago and currently also serve on the board, or also would be known as the Vestry, at my parish here in New York. And I also invite Miguel, who's our other presenter this evening, to introduce himself.
Great, and just want to confirm that, Brendan, you can hear me?
I can hear you.
Great, okay. Hi, this is Miguel Escalade, and I am joining from the Minneapolis airport on account of the blizzard that is taking place in New York. So there may be a little bit of background noise. I tried to find the quietest spot in the airport to present from. If in the chat box you can let me know whenever there's much background noise, we will switch over and maybe Brendan can take over that part of the presentation for me. My name is Miguel Escalade, and I serve as the Managing Program Director here at ECF for Leadership Resources. That means very closely with Brendan on ECF vital practices, on workshops and webinars. And it's just a real pleasure to be here with all of you. And we will push forward, and hopefully that the Minneapolis airport is a great place to lead a webinar from. So we will do our very best here. So. Okay, with that, what we always want to begin with is an opening prayer. And so on the screen, we have copied one. Prayer attributed to Sir Francis Drake, which we hope you might also use at various Vestry meetings as a way of encouraging people to dare a little bit more boldly throughout the year. So let us pray. Disturb us, Lord, when we are too well pleased with ourselves, when our dreams have come true because we have dreamed too little, when we arrived safely because we sailed too close to the shore. Disturb us, Lord, when, with the abundance of things we possess, we have lost our thirst for the waters of life. Having fallen in love with life, we have ceased to dream of eternity, and in our efforts to build a new earth, we have allowed our vision of a new heaven to dim. Disturb us, Lord, to dare more boldly to venture on wider seas, where storms will show your mastery. Where losing sight of land we shall find the stars, we ask you to push back the horizons of our hopes and to push into the future in strength, courage, hope, and love. Amen.
Amen.
Okay, so this webinar is in 4 parts. We have an hour, and as Brendan mentioned a little bit earlier, it's intended to be a one-on-one presentation to cover the general basics. We're going to be going over the role of the vestry, then key vestry responsibilities, and then dig into some tools and resources for new vestry leaders. Oftentimes in the surveys, we note that the tools and resources for new vestry leaders is considered some of the most helpful parts of this vestry presentation, because people get to leave with a whole bunch of different materials in their back pocket, as it were. Finally, we will take the whole presentation and kind of summarize what the next steps are for this material. And so with that, I am going to hand this off to Brendan for the first part.
Great, thanks, Miguel. So to get started, I always like to take a look at our past to be able to get a sense of where we've been and how we've arrived where we are currently. So you might be wondering why there is an image of an armoire on this slide. To give a bit of a history of where we get vestry from today, I'd like to give a very quick overview to jumping back to the Church of England, and the process of electing church wardens took place during Easter week. It was a simple process. All adult land-owning male parishioners would crowd into the room where the clergy person would robe. That is the room called the vestry, to hear accounts of the past church wardens and to elect their successors. Skipping forward quite a bit and across the pond as well, in the Episcopal Church history, specifically in Virginia, parishes had become so large with so many land-owning men in the parish that it was impossible to be able to crowd everyone into this one robing room. And so it was developed a practice of electing 12 representatives of this congregation, of the membership rather, the congregation, for life. So I might want to repeat that for you, life. Thankfully, I don't think most of us have that anymore at our congregations. Although most vestry members have, terms to their service. Oh, excuse me, sorry, something's going on with the screen. Backing up here. So thankfully, we have expanded our understanding of what it means to be on the vestry. No longer is it just landowning males. We have men and women, and in some case, youth are able to serve on the vestry. And if you don't have any youth representation on your vestry, maybe that's something you might want to check out and see if that's allowed within your diocese. Again, sometimes there are legal parameters which may allow only voice and not vote. But something you might want to consider, as well as, of course, the term things that I also iterated, that typically now most vestry members serve terms of 3 or 4 years, and let's be glad that we don't serve for life. Vestries are typically elected at the annual parish meeting, which typically takes place at the beginning of the calendar year, but is not necessarily the case with all congregations. Some hold them in the spring, others we've even heard hold them in the fall, or even during Advent. Another practice that I'd like to just highlight for you is that most vestries tend to be between 6 to 12 members. This depends upon your bylaws and your diocesan canons as well. And for those of you who may be in a smaller congregation, a practice that I'd also like to highlight to you is that some smaller congregations have trimmed their vestry, say from 12 members to 8 members or 6 members, so that if your average Sunday attendance is 30 or 40 people, you're not trying to get an entire third or half of your congregation elected, onto the vestry at any given point in time. Whatever the size of your vestry is, though, the vestry does serve as the legal representative body of the parish regarding all matters into its corporate property. The rector of the parish is the presiding officer, which is not to say that they necessarily need to lead all vestry meetings. The former bishop of the Diocese of Texas, Claude Payne, advises to consider having the senior warden trained to lead vestry meetings, or perhaps another trusted member of the vestry to do this. In Bishop Payne's words, this allows rectors to focus on the matter at hand rather than how well the meeting is being run, and to be able to note certain things such as body language, and to be able to intervene when necessary in a way that would not be possible if he or she were presiding over the meeting. As far as structure goes, there are typically two wardens. In congregations, this is typically the senior warden and the junior warden, sometimes known as the rector's warden or the people's wardens. There's some other terms out there as well. In mission congregations, often the term is the bishop's warden, the people's warden. But again, sometimes the terminology differs. If you have particular terms that you guys use that I didn't name, I'd love to hear that in the chat box. In some congregations, we know that the junior warden has special responsibility over church property and buildings, but I would say this is not written in stone. So if this isn't something that's working, again, check your bylaws. Perhaps that's something that is written in there and needs to be changed, but it may just be by habit and something that you may want to consider looking into if that's not working. Some vestries will elect their treasurer and their clerk. In other cases, these positions rather, are appointed. So again, these are various traditions and customs that vary from parish to parish. So those are some of the basic principles that are common amongst most Episcopal vestries. But what is it that vestries do? The Episcopal Church Foundation sees the role of the vestry in the four parts that you can see here on the screen. While there is oftentimes almost an exclusive emphasis on the stewardship of congregations' property and finances, we at ECF believe that vestries have a key role in first discerning how God is calling your congregation and community of faith to live out the gospel in your particular place in this particular time. Second, working with the clergy, those of you who are elected members of the vestry, to work with your clergy to articulate a shared mission, vision, and strategic plan for the congregation that responds to this call. Third, we believe that vestries have an important role in identifying new leaders for both the congregation and the wider church. This is also something that's canonically required that we'll speak a bit in just a moment. And finally, vestries are the legal representative body of the congregation for all matters pertaining to corporate property, and thus you do have special responsibilities related to the property, finance, and human resources of the congregation. This is all stuff that we'll be touching a bit more on. At this moment, however, I'd like to take a look at the church canons in terms of what your actual canonical responsibilities are. And one interesting and somewhat quirky aspect of the church-wide canons is that they actually have very little to say about the purpose and organization of parish vestries. This is the list that you see on your screen. And broadly speaking, the first two bullet points relate to making sure that a congregation is being a good steward of their property and finances, whereas the second two relate to identifying religious leadership. Vestries do play a particularly important role during times of clergy transition and in nominating people for holy orders. In the prior slide, I outlined what ECF sees as the four main responsibilities, and these canons offer a bit more detail about the latter two, identifying new leadership and stewarding resources. What's missing from this description, however, is the important role that vestries have in discerning God's call to the congregation and in developing the mission and vision and strategic plan in response to this call. More and more, we at ECF believe that vestries are called to partner with their clergy in leading the congregation in this complex and, quite frankly, challenging times for many congregations. And these are challenging times for Episcopal congregations. Since 2010, ECF has been conducting surveys of our Vital Practices subscribers, our readership, which are made up of congregational leaders. Hopefully a bunch of you are subscribed, and perhaps you may have taken the survey yourself if you've been a subscriber. And in that survey, we ask two different questions. One, asking what you as a congregational leader have needed most help in over the past 6 months, and what it is that you believe you'll need the most help in the coming 6 months. When asking leaders to think over the past 6 months of ministry what areas they needed the most help or guidance in, it's not surprising that topics such as vestry leadership, stewardship, administration, and change popped up quite a bit. But I'd also like to share that we're seeing more and more that clergy transition has been moving up in the needs for congregational leaders. This is most likely in response to many baby boomers who are beginning to retire and or congregations that are no longer able to afford a full-time priest. When looking down the road, again, not surprisingly, the topic of stewardship was the area that most people felt most concern in about immediate needs, whereas vision and planning was by far and away the area of most importance for investors consider when they're looking to negotiate the next 6 months. Interestingly, both of these areas hinge on what ECF considers its strategic role of the vestry, namely that of identifying a hopeful vision for the future which can rally the congregation and generate gifts of time, talent, and treasure. You'll also see on here that evangelism has popped up, and that was a very recent thing that has popped up, which is a wonderful response to that Bishop Curry's vision for us to join in the Jesus movement. That congregational leaders are hearing this and seeing this as well. When we take into account our wider civic and cultural landscape, the importance of the vestry and leadership team engaged in strategic thinking in these conversations, as I've been noting to you and will continue to note to you in this webinar, becomes more and more important. While there are many different changes that are important for congregations to take into account, these are just a few that I would like to especially highlight for you that in many cases may not have taken into account. Average Sunday attendance in the church now is at 60 people. That was from the 2015 study of Episcopal congregations. So what we define as small church in many cases is your average Episcopal church. There is an increasing reliance and need on lay leadership that you may be aware of within your own congregation, but know that many other congregations are struggling with this issue. And in many cases, congregations are having to figure out how to operate with a less than full-time priest. In many congregations are also beginning to look outside themselves and realizing that their neighborhoods are increasingly different than those who are in the pews. The increase in Latinos within their neighborhoods and their congregations, and in many cases, the growth of multicultural congregations. And I would also just like to quickly highlight that there are significant differences in generational patterns between generations, but there are also some increasingly encouraging information that we've been getting from the millennial generation exhibiting giving patterns of the greatest generation. You might want to check out that study. But on the flip side, though, there is concern, though, that millennials are not projected to make nearly as much as their generations ahead of them. So just some things to take into account. So that's a lot of territory we just covered and not a lot of time. So I would just encourage you to take this moment to ask any questions if you have them in the chat box. If everything made sense, if things didn't make sense, I'm also going to take a look and see if anybody had anything in the chat box that I may have missed. Oh, that's awesome, yeah. It's a really interesting setup Mary's just highlighting about their particular leadership within their smaller congregation and also being in a resort community. It's a really creative response to that. That's wonderful. I see some folks are typing. So yeah, definitely encourage you to put those questions up there. And sharing that the rector is going to retire and then just a bit intimidated. Never fear, you are not alone in this, and there are resources to help with clergy transition. We'll talk about a couple of things that you might want to use, but definitely we'll want to make sure that you get some of those resources on transition. Pamela asked, how long is the term for your vestry members? At my parish, my specific parish, it's actually a 4-year term. I think most congregations, again, this is anecdotal, we don't have any hard data on this, would be about 3 years, I believe is more the norm. I think most people find that 2 years is a bit too short because by the time that people really get up to speed, they're already rotating off. Yeah, Christine is sharing 3 years. If so folks want to type in how long their vestry terms are, I'd love to get a sense of, we can, collective knowledge in the room. Great. Well, if you have any other questions, please keep those coming in the chat box. I'll be taking a look and will respond to them as I can in there. And if you'd like to share your vestry terms as well, I'd love to hear from you too on that. And right now, I will hand it over to Miguel.
Great. Thank you, Brendan. So just a quick note. Again, I'm joining from an airport because of the blizzard in New York. If at any
Miguel, we're having a little difficulty hearing. Miguel, are you still there? We may have lost you.
Okay.
We can hear you now.
Okay, now you can hear me? Okay, great. Well, I was just talking about how if you couldn't hear me, just please let me know. So hopefully that won't happen again. Let me just, Brendan went over 4 different vestry responsibilities, and so what I'm going to do is dig in just a little bit deeper about those, beginning with the idea that the vestry has an important role in discerning the mission and vision for the or God's mission and vision for the congregation today. A little bit earlier, we mentioned the surveys that ECF has conducted from 2011 on. One of the things that we discovered is that many congregations are struggling with questions of purpose. What does it mean to be an Episcopal congregation today? Who is God calling your local congregation to be? As often as we might want to provide a ready-made answer, more and more vestries are realizing that the answer has to come from themselves, from conversations that happen among the vestry, and in conversation with the wider congregation. Each Episcopal congregation is different and will have to answer in their own unique way this question of why they exist. And one of the main ways that a lot of congregations are doing that is by putting prayer and Bible study on the regular meeting agenda, creating opportunities for deeper reflection. On the right-hand side of the screen, there is a cartoon of a first-time vestry member surprised to see Bible study at the top of the vestry meeting agenda. The caption reads, first-time vestry members suddenly realized that tonight's meeting was about more than just the budget. It is about more than just the budget. We strongly believe that vestries need to understand their role as faith leaders in the congregation, holding the Bible in one hand and the annual operating budget in the other. And one way that Episcopal congregations are doing that is by structuring vestries to prioritize mission and vision. They do this by placing faith formation at the top of the agenda. Oftentimes this takes the form of a Bible study or a period of prayer and reflection. That is one simple change. A larger, a more structural change might be forming a small property and finance committee, which is overseen by the vestry. This committee makes recommendations to the vestry about the day-to-day issues affecting the life of the congregation, and thus that frees vestries to focus more of their time on the strategic, bigger picture issues and explore these in light of God's call to the congregations today. A second key vestry responsibility is the ongoing development of a congregation's mission and vision. ECF defines a congregational mission as a simple, operable description of what it is that God has called the congregation to do. You may already have a mission statement in place, especially now as new vestry members come on. This is a really important document to dust off, re-engage, and expand upon as you plan for the coming year. We define a congregational vision as a hopeful picture of what the church and world looks like once your mission has been fully realized. It is intended to be a picture of the transformation of the congregation and neighborhood that is to come. So in the chat box, I'm wondering if you could just think about this question and then possibly type into the chat box. If your congregation already has a mission and vision statement, how is your vestry familiarizing itself with these documents at this point? And how is your vestry exploring their applicability for today? So as you go ahead and type your response to that question, I think I'm going to move to the next slide, which is, again, just digging into the second, or rather the third, key vestry responsibility. Oh, great. Mary Staley, thank you. Yes, mission statements, vision statements, they're set to music and sung from time to time. That's a great idea. Some people also literally do something very simple, such as just printing them out and reading them aloud and kind of recommitting. For instance, Susan Champion, we read it at every meeting and often, so people are very familiar with it. But not connecting it to our daily lives as much as we could. Oh, wonderful. Great idea. Our mission statement is a collect that we say at the end, prayers to the people. Wonderful. Okay, so there's some great ideas in the chat box, and maybe we can make sure to share that whenever we send out the recording as well as a resource for everyone. Another key responsibility is the identification and formation of the next generation of leaders. And this is also true, true in general for leadership, but it's also true for vestry. So what do we mean by identifying the next generation of leadership for the church? Brendan gave an overview just a moment ago of the canon, and that included a canonical role in finding new rectors. I believe someone in our audience is a senior warden and will be going through a clergy transition, and she's facing the significant role and responsibility of having to help her congregation make that transition. That is a canonical responsibility. There's also a canonical responsibility in helping to identify postulants for holy orders. But in addition to these canonical responsibilities, vestry members have the additional responsibility of identifying people who have leadership potential for the wider congregation. So how are vestry members joining with the clergy to keep an eye out for individuals who can serve the congregation in a new way? Now, many of you have just completed or are completing a nomination and election process. While these processes differ from parish to parish and diocese to diocese, what we want to emphasize here is that it's really critical for vestries to take a proactive role in identifying potential new members for the vestry throughout the year. Deliberate nomination processes take into account the extent to which someone is really excited about the mission and vision of the congregation. It engages people's gifts, skills, and passion. Borrowed from the world of community organizing, tools around doing one-on-one are really helpful. We can learn to be more proactive in church about searching for people with significant leadership potential, conducting one-on-one to explore gifts and talents, and remembering the old community organizing adage, want something done, ask a busy person. That is to say that people who are heavily involved in community activities are oftentimes, but not always, are oftentimes folks who follow through on their commitments, and you want to plant a seed early about the possibility of them serving in your church early on. Okay. And last but in no way least, do we come to property and finances, which is oftentimes what many people think of as the primary responsibility of the vestry. Vestries are required to be good stewards of property and resources, creating financially sustainable, vital congregations. And these legal and canonical responsibilities are very important. Our point in putting discernment of mission and vision at the top, however, is that all of this stewardship has to be done in the context of the broader mission and vision. That's why we place discernment of mission and vision first, and property, money, staff, all of these are resources for living out that mission and vision. So it's always good to make sure we know what comes first and what is serving what in this process. There are a lot of complex issues regarding income stream, as well as budgeting, as well as how to navigate things like debt. Some common issues in Episcopal Church is looking again at income streams, using rentable space as a source of income, running annual stewardship, especially if you're a small congregation, don't have enough people to have a stewardship committee, developing a planned giving program, doing capital campaigns. All of these areas are critical, and I guess because they're so complex, we can't really go into them very in a lot of depth. So what I just want to make sure you know is that ECF has a lot of resources available on things like capital campaigns and annual stewardship that you can explore. And please let us know if we can be of any help there. These are really critical issues. Another critical issue that vestries have to consider is liability. Vestries are the legal boards and directors of congregations, and a lot of that is spelled out, not only, a lot of what that means is spelled out not only by the canons, but by state law. So again, make sure you have director's insurance, as well as other forms of insurance, and make sure that you're clear about the liability of vestry members in regard to your congregation. So one of the things that, this is not necessarily a vestry responsibility so much as it is the means by which vestries carry out the responsibility. Vestries do a lot of different things throughout the year, but one of the main places of points through which vestry service is experienced is in meetings. And so one of the points that we make over and over again is that, you know, to the extent possible, to the extent that we can improve the quality of meetings, really what you're doing is improving the overall experience on the vestry. So what we want to just highlight here are a few points, is that vestries do need to meet regularly and retreat regularly. Oftentimes, vestries will have a monthly meeting and will retreat at least once a year, sometimes twice a year, in the first, around now, January, February, as a Vestry Orientation, and also in fall.
Oh, Miguel, I think we may have lost you. Miguel? 1 second, everyone. Sorry, this is the sometimes burden of also the technology that we have. Okay, I think you're back.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Well, Brendan, if that happens again, just please feel free to kind of continue where I left off, I think. I'm not sure where I left off here. I think
Miguel, are you there? Sorry, everyone. It appears that everything just reset. Okay. All right, sorry about that. We will get this all back up as quickly as possible. All right, can everyone hear me? Can I just get one or two, someone to verify that my audio is good? Great. All right. Sorry about that. We were a little nervous about trying to do this with a remote setup, but we'll press ahead. But to pick up where Miguel was talking about with needing to regularly meet and retreat. You know, with retreats, an opportunity to be able to get to know each other. And I know that in many cases, people are like, well, I know everybody who's coming onto the vestry, or I know everyone who's on the vestry, but we're talking about you're in a particular context. You are a particular group. It's within this unique scope and time frame with a very specific purpose. And so it's a time to be able to get to know each other not only as personally, but also in terms of the work that you're set out to do. And that's really one of the key things I'd like to emphasize, what it is that you're doing as a leadership body, discerning what it is that you're going to be doing, the strategic planning and work that you need to do ahead. With meetings, I would be remiss not to cover covenants and norms. Sometimes these are referred to as ground rules. An example of such a covenant or norm would be that we expect to meet on time. We expect people to be at the vestry meeting. That if you're going to be absent, you will notify the secretary or the rector as soon as possible, etc. Another thing would be like expect people to listen with an open mind and open heart, and to be able to disagree in a Christian way. We've spoken about some of those 2 points with covenants and norms. While the clergy doesn't always need to be the presiding officer, this doesn't mean that they need to also be the meeting facilitator. Typically the parliamentary procedure, there's an opportunity to be able to appoint a meeting chair, and you can hand over the gavel for a certain section of the meeting, for example. Miguel has been talking about spiritual practices. There are something that we'd like to dig perhaps a little more into, and handing that over to a particular person to lead that part of that meeting. The last 2 points that you have up here on your screen have to do with that prioritizing the agenda, which of course is a major part of your meeting. If you don't have an agenda, I would encourage you to immediately put that back into practice. And if you recall back to that cartoon with the woman looking a little surprised at the agenda at her vestry meeting, surprised to see that Jesus in the Bible study was at the top of that agenda. In some cases, it can be as simple as working on that change over time to really make an impact in terms of how effectively your vestry meets. In some cases, if it can be as simple as introducing scripture or just a simple prayer and then trying to build upon that. Now, you realize that this is the one time when your congregations haven't had their annual meeting or annual budgets at this moment, so it might make sense to spend some more time on this if that's the case. Is there room for other aspects of formation onto your agenda? To be able to have some of those bigger visioning type questions rather than spending all the time nitpicking at the budget. Is our neighborhood changing? Are the demographics changing? These are important and critical issues to the future health and vitality of your church. So again, with apologies for a little the breakup in the content. Again, if you have any questions, I invite you to put those into the chat box. And Anne, hopefully the visuals are back up. If that's still a problem, let us know. Oh dear, still can't see anything. Is anyone else having problems seeing the slides? This is odd. It's a bit of a mixture. Uh, I will quickly just though stop it and restart it to see if that can do that. All right, thanks everyone. I'll quickly flip that and see if that hopefully helps with that. If not, if you can't see them, again, the left-hand side, the files box, you can download a copy of the slides. And again, if you do have any questions, I don't mean to make that just about the visuals, please let me know. Not to my knowledge, Mark. That doesn't seem to be the problem. And thank you, Christine, for that comment of spiritual growth of vestry members will enrich the parish. So much about the work that we do with vestries. That is a thing that we come back to quite often. I'm going to quickly pull up an article by Blair Pogue, who is the rector of, I think it's St. Matthew's, and she's in the Episcopal Church in Minnesota. And that describes about getting the vestry into that those spiritual practices and being able to really tackle the bigger issues in the parish and becoming a well-functioning team, and how important that is. And she's actually going to be leading another webinar coming up that some of you may already be registered for, of ways to let God lead your vestry on February 23rd. So I would encourage you to consider coming to that one if your vestry in particular is looking to focus on that issue. Oh, and I see Miguel has already put that into the chat box, so thanks, Miguel. The article is Cultivating a Culture of Discernment, so would just tuck that link off to the side for later. We have a question about how long should a typical vestry meeting be? Yours seem to go on for long meetings. So if you find that to be a problem, first I think you might want to consider looking at establishing some norms or covenants. Maybe you need to establish that our meetings will be no longer than an hour and a half, or if may no be our meetings will be no longer than 2 hours. Personally, it's been our anecdotal experience with vestries that typically they're about an hour and a half. Some vestries will push it to an hour. I would say that's really difficult to do, especially if you're really going to take that time to dig into some of those bigger questions, to be able to spend some time with some spiritual reflection and formation. That an hour and a half really adds to that. 2 hours is good. Over 2 hours, though, I personally couldn't want to sit through a vestry meeting that's over 2 hours. Would be, again, invite folks to share how long your vestry meeting is to get a sense of what we have here in the room. And yes, thanks, Miguel, for that reminder. That setting a norm for limiting your time so that you don't go over is a really critical function. Those are really great ways to, again, provide that accountability for folks. And we actually just did a webinar on vestry covenants and norms about a couple weeks ago that goes into that topic more in depth. And there's some, again, some other great resources that we're happy to share from ECF Auto Practices on that as well. So if there are more questions, please keep those coming in the chat box, but I'm going to go ahead and press ahead so that we can make sure we get to all of our time. So a couple of tools and resources. The first thing that's on here is just wanting to note the changes in vestry roles depending upon your church size, and a lot of that has to do with the dynamics of your congregation. And there are two different links, one that's up on your side, which is a source for this data, but there's also a summary sheet as well that's on ECF Auto Practices that I'm also going to put into the chat box. That's a little more of a bullet point that breaks this down a little more. And So if you want to read more about that, definitely that link on the slide. It covers that a lot more in depth, or just use that bullet point one that's in the chat box. And that's to keep in mind in terms of the dynamics in terms of the size. Family-sized church tends to be what's referred to as a single cell. So there's one core unit of the church in terms of where the major decisions are and conversations are happening. And as the congregation grows larger, these grow into more and more units. And therefore you have more and more groups and stakeholder groups that the vestry needs to be aware of and needs to be checking in with when it comes to decision making. Is a very, again, brief overview of how to be taking this into consideration. You may have heard things like rector-centric parish. This can be within any different context, but again, that tends to play out very differently. Rector-centric parish in a family church is very different than in a larger resource church. And again, I would just like to emphasize for you as well that the vast majority of our Episcopal congregations tend to fall within the family-sized church or pastoral-sized church as well. Just about over half now are within that 0 to 75 ASA range. Just want to take that into consideration for your leadership model. Want to also talk about building your toolbox. Many of you may be going on a retreat or doing an orientation. Perhaps this is part of your orientation to being on the vestry. Maybe you would like to put together something so that you have some resources for new vestry members. And if you do have some resources for vestry members, if you put that together, I'd love to hear about that in the chat box. That would be great. I know of one parish that has literally the vestry binder, and you do get that binder with those with everything in that gets handed off when you join the vestry. This may include everything from the canons of your diocese, any of those relevant state nonprofit and corporation laws. Definitely encourage you to take a look at your parish bylaws, and if you don't have bylaws, look to establishing those bylaws and making sure that you're running them by your chancellor and your parish's legal counsel to make sure you get those reviewed. Keeping those up to date because, again, those are things that you can fall back to when you reach challenging times and will keep things from going off the rails, so to speak. Having that mission statement, maybe not just of your congregation, but also of your diocese. And then if you don't have that or don't know or can recall that, maybe stick that up in the front. We also had somebody in the chat box say that gets printed on the front of the bulletin. Setting it to song, which sounds really cool. I'd love to hear and see how that works in that within that particular congregation. History can really be informative, getting an understanding of how your congregation was shaped. The BCP is a great place for those spiritual practices. If you need a quick prayer, keep one off to the side. And of course, last but not least, would definitely want to encourage you to keep a Bible on your hands at all times. And as I always like to share and reiterate in this Vestry Orientation webinar, to read the Bible as much as possible, to inwardly digest and take in the scriptures, because as leaders it's so important for us to be grounded spiritually and in scripture, and that reading the Bible is just not an option as Christians, and especially not as vestry leaders. I had mentioned our ECF publications and the Vestry Resource Guide. That's just a little more information about that. So definitely check that out as a resource that you may want to have for your new and current vestry members. It contains a wealth of information there, including a commissioning service. And I know that in the last Vestry Orientation, we had a bit more conversation about vestry commissioning services. If you do that, I'd love to hear about that too. Hopefully we can collect a few more of those and we'll be able to share that, some of those on ECF practices as well. ECF auto practices, which we have been mentioning and sending links to, that includes Vestry Papers, which has been in print, in existence since 1995, and some of you may be subscribers to that. It's free. Sign up, get that. It's tools, resources, and ideas by congregational leaders for congregational leaders. This is not experts from on high coming up with ideas and solutions. This is stuff that we're finding and sourcing from other Episcopal congregations, which makes this so great. And I hope for everyone very practical as well. So check that out, sign up, and get your other Vestry members to sign up as well for those ideas, tools, and inspiration. The Episcopal Church publishes another great resource, which is the Manual of Business Methods in Church Affairs. And if that title is a bit of a mouthful, that's also because the booklet can be a little bit cumbersome to deal with, but it is a very helpful tool. I know, having been in parish administration, I particularly use this for the document retention records guideline. To be able to figure out what stuff we needed to keep in the church office, what stuff we might be able to finally get out of there or shred, which was great because I know when I first arrived on scene, we had files going back to the 40s and 50s, which is a little bit scary. So there are questions when it comes to financial practices about insurance. If you're not sure about director's insurance, this is going to be the document that's going to be able to help provide that guidance for you. So again, you can download that, and it's also available in Spanish as well. Oh, and I should also note, too, if you're needing more help with your parochial reports and with your record keeping and that, there's great information on that, too, as we know that can be a bit of a tricky process to get all those numbers together. So definitely check that out if you're struggling at all with that. One more resource from the Episcopal Church, again, that I really just want Vestry members to be aware of, because this is out there, it's on the web, it's all for free, and oftentimes people just aren't aware of this. Those parochial reports, they do go somewhere, and stuff happens with that. And one of the things that occurs with all of this data is that it's compiled into a chart so that you don't have to compile and put together your own charts. So you can go to that link that's in the middle of your screen to get a chart that features the most recent 11 years of your congregation's pledge and plate, your baptized membership, as well as your average Sunday attendance. And while this is not going to say your congregation is healthy, your congregation is doing well, your congregation is completely wacky, this is a barometer. And so that's what I encourage folks to do. Take a look at where those trends are going. One trend that we see sometimes that is, something that I would encourage you to be aware of and to consider is when, pledge and plate on average has been going up each year in Episcopal congregations, yet attendance in them has been going down. How is that those sort of trends are going to be sustainable or not? And should you be looking at that data and having some more serious questions about it? There's also a free report that's a community profile featuring 12 different demographic insights, including things like household age and income, and it's chock full of information. It may not be necessarily that helpful for your congregation. For my parish, which is in the middle of New York in Times Square, it's kind of not that useful. For a more suburban or even rural setting, that actually could provide some great information. I worked for a suburban congregation prior to coming to ECF, and we actually used the community profile. It provided some really great information for that 3-mile radius around us to be able to inform us a bit more about our community and how we could best serve the needs of our surrounding community. So we have about 5-ish more minutes left of this webinar. I just would invite you again, if you have any more questions, please put those into the chat box. Any additional thoughts or comments, any resources maybe that you have found particularly useful, I'd love to hear about that. But these potential next steps, again, you'll get a link to download these slides, are just some ideas. This is collecting everything that we've just been through and are just compiling them into some ideas for what you might be able to take back, because we all know that it's drinking from the fire hose, and it can be a little difficult to figure out, well, what am I going to do with this? So maybe you pick one or two there. If you don't have a spiritual practice at the beginning of your at the beginning of your vestry meeting, maybe consider starting your vestry meeting now regularly with a Bible study or other sort of spiritual practice. Maybe you can, dust off those parish bylaws and diocesan canons and take a look through them and see if there are things that need to be updated. Are there practices that you're currently doing that don't match up with those? Do we need to take a look at maybe forming some norms and covenants in the case of the vestry meeting running way too long. So again, would just invite you to add your thoughts, your comments. Are there any particular challenges that you're still concerned about, that you're looking ahead, things that you're excited about, things you're still wondering? And I would say that if you do have that question, it's very, very likely that at least one other person has that. So definitely ask that because it is something that I have also may have missed and definitely want to make sure that we cover. Oh yes, and I'd also like to highlight that, Miguel, thank you for sharing the consent agenda. That is something that you might want to look into, especially if you're feeling like you're pretty good in all these practices, that your vestry is pretty much on board with a lot of these things. The consent agenda is a tool that you can use to be able to pile together reports, some information, and be able to be non-controversial, routine, typically items, and to be able to circulate that amongst the vestry ahead of time, so that by the time you get to the meeting, unless somebody says, we need to flag this for discussion, then that item gets pulled out. You can just then approve that in one fell swoop, which is really a great way to be able to speed up the process, so you're not sitting there and having to go through each individual item and waiting for somebody to also take a look at that for the first time, and to be able to spend more time on those big picture issues. Question, what is the ideal manner of identifying vestry members to the congregation? An interesting aspect. Actually, we just had a blog post by Linda, or one of our bloggers, Linda Buskirk, about, I believe the title on that was Top 10 Traits of a Terrific Vestry Member, which I will put into the chat box. I think it's a really, really great list of different qualities for looking for somebody who can be on your vestry, but that's something that I would encourage you to discuss with other members of your congregation's leadership. But generally speaking, and another one, thank you, Janie Kirk Norris's resources too, for being able to identify vestry members. But one key thing that I would highlight right now is somebody who does have able to communicate a hopeful vision for the future of your congregation, who is somebody who is open to the Spirit and is somebody that is ready to jump in and to be able to take on not only the difficult issues, but also the great ministry of being able to lead your congregation. Question for the vestry election, do you recommend a slate of 3 for 3 openings or a contested election of 5 for 3? Definitely check out the resources by Janie Kirk Norris. That really depends. In terms of your process and the number of people that you're able to raise up for the vestry. And as Miguel mentioned, there seems to be a widespread practice of a recommendation of only electing the number of people for the openings. That tends to be pervasive. That's not necessarily the case, but generally speaking, most congregations tend to nominate the number of people for the number of slots that are available. That's not set in stone though, but definitely check out some thoughts and ideas about that. I do want to be respectful of the time, so I will hang on for a little bit longer if you have some more questions, but do want to note that you can always contact us at ECS. There is a link to our website as well as ECF Auto Practices. Email us, call us. We're always happy to have a conversation with you. And again, thank you so much for being part of this webinar this evening. Before you sign off, open up your email inbox, take out your phone or your tablet, or click over to your inbox in your email, because at the top of that should be right now or very soon a link to a survey. Please click on that and take a few minutes to fill out the survey. We read every single comment that you give because we value your feedback so much, and this will help us to improve this webinar as well as planning and executing future webinars. And apologies again for the technical difficulties. Thank you so much for bearing with us and being very helpful in commenting and helping us to figure out the stuff that we needed to fix. It was some challenges, but it was great fun being with you this evening. Thank you so much for attending. God bless and Godspeed in your vestry ministry. Have a great night.